something that we both believe in, that doing nothing is a problem. Like, I can't handle people who just say, not my problem, I'm not going to do anything.
Oh my God, your life has no relevance.
You're taking up space on the planet.
Yeah, that's the unforgivable sin in my mind. Hey there, if you've joined the podcast today, my name is Chris Jarvis. I work with companies on employee giving and volunteering programs.
And my name's Jake McIsaac. I spend a lot of time thinking about public safety and restorative justice.
So we are having conversations here that we've been having for 20 years.
Yeah, the only difference now is we press record and share it with you.
Thanks for joining us.
On this episode, we step past the tangled politics used by powerful people to excuse oppression. We consider the most impacted people, who each possess profound value, regardless of their identity.
Yeah, so throughout human history, right up to the current events happening in Palestine today, there's a bunch of global questions about who's responsible for the suffering. And some of that responsibility is borne by some people more than others, but the system just keeps going forward.
It's the reckoning that occurs in our conscience when we encounter the face of injustice. It's the groups that benefit from the status quo.
So when politics fails morality, how can any of us take a principled stand against violence targeting any vulnerable group while implicated in the very systems that enable it? Join us today. We're going to take a deep dive into a very complicated, horrible topic.
I've been thinking a lot of, since our last podcast when we talked about Israel, Palestine.
Yeah, I think it was, we recorded mid-November, but it's the podcast that went up just prior to this one.
Yeah, and some of the podcasts have been all over the place in terms of recording and releasing later, but I thought it was really important. And we both agreed that it's important to have a really close follow-up between these two podcasts. Because while we recorded that months ago, it's still very much an ongoing issue and thought for us.
Yeah, so there's 3 months between that recording and this recording, and we thought it'd be interesting to sort of take stock of our own experiences between those time periods.
Yeah, I had a friend. Now, if they're listening, they will know who they are, and so this is how their voice sounds to me. So that's probably unhelpful, or I'll be in trouble. But it was like this. I was like, what's going on? I got to get to the gym. I was like, all right. I got to get to the gym before all the 1 monthers get there. It's January, all this new year, new me stuff. I can't wait for things to get back to normal. And I was like, oh, that's a little judgy. Really banking that people will give up. People will look away. People will not carry through on their commitments. And I wonder if there's a little bit of that in terms of our focus and looking toward the conflict where people are just saying, can't we just get back to normal? It's really, really hard to look at.
You know, there's outrage on both sides. There's outrage that what was done with to Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was this outrage that has been there for a long time. But what the Zionist governments of Israel have done to the Palestinians. But it was definitely a flashpoint. And it was huge. And it was all over the news and it was everywhere. And it was the only thing seemingly discussed. And now this many months later, where is the outrage? Because the horror is just growing.
There is something with those alerts, right? It's alert or alarmist in some ways when you get that, breaking news, beep, 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 beep. We interrupt whatever you're doing to bring you this thing. And then it lands like what am I supposed to do with this? And they information download, and then they're like, okay, we'll get you back to your regularly scheduled programming. And
that's right.
And it kind of leaves us, how do you actually do that in real life? It's great for programmers on television to do that and traditional media sources. How do you or should we?
To create personal alerts? Yeah. So that there's an interesting, and I hope to remember to put this in the show notes, but there's an interesting bias that allows us we notice, all humans are this way. We only notice what's new in the world, and our assessment is threat or benefit. Once we sort of see it enough times to just understand that it belongs, or it's this or it's that. And we sort of assign it some kind of meaning. Once we categorized it, it becomes part of the white noise in the background, unless it's part of our identity, and then we'll continue to see it and notice it. But that's the only way that we can survive in a world with so much communication coming at us all the time. Is this evolutionary dynamic?
I wonder, when you're talking about that white noise, is that so that we can it helps us regulate that again? Because we'll always be on high alert trying to sense make. Okay, I know what that is. I don't actually have to think about that. That is now in the background, not drawing on important resources to do that first thing that you said. Are you a helper, or are you going to hurt me? Threat cues.
Threat or benefit. Scanning. Yeah.
So it's looking away once we realize it's no threat to us. So it's no threat to my everyday. It's probably really awful for folks and who are there, obviously, and then who are tangentially connected. Those are my family. That's my group. Those are my people. But if we're a few steps removed, it starts to white noise.
Right.
And I wonder why.
Evolutionary biology would suggest that only that our in-group is our blood ties, or what we would understand that to be DNA or associated related DNA, right? But we had to extend that because there are other families involved, and their families are part of our families through marriage. So we need to make sure that that family is going to be okay. And this becomes a little tribe, and then tribe expands a little bit more. And then, but humans can kind of organize around the strangest thing. The biggest extension used today in geopolitical situations is the nation state.
Yeah.
So it's our willingness to, as a group, believe there's such a thing called Canada with a line across the world here, there, and other places. And I'm a Canadian. And then that identity tells me how to think about things in the world, so that if something happens to a Canadian, I have an evolutionary wiring that can pick up and go, that's me.
Right.
I feel that. And my reaction is, I must stop the pain. I must intervene, or I must stop the pain. I must look away because I don't have agency. Right. So if I lack agency, I will look away, or if I think I lack agency, but I'm going to stop the pain one way or another. And so I think that's where this whole thing comes from, with who do we care about? Who don't we care about? There's a bit of a time, a life expectancy on caring too. It's sad. It is sad to see in myself, Jake. And I think that's why I wanted to talk about it, because we were talking about it as quite recent and big and affecting us in this the episode previous to this one. But now I can go whole days with it, thinking about it.
Right. That's exactly it. We have done that on different topics throughout the last 3 seasons. We talked about Russia, Ukraine. We talked about the plight of our unhoused neighbors, the legislation of anti-choice folks that took away abortion rights in the U.S. Like we've talked about different things, and it's urgent and it's on fire, and we're talking. And then a little while later, to your point, we're not even thinking about it. When we go back to it, we can harness that energy again and get angry and want to do something about it. But I wonder about the staying power of that. I had a guy last week who was talking, and I didn't pick up on it because I took it for what I think was just happening in the background. But he was trying to tell me about a reference point. He's like, like when, like Black Lives Matter a few years ago. You remember that? And kept moving in the conversation. I was like, I remember that one day, and there is this moment where we nicely compartmentalize these struggles or these call to action. But, it's Black Lives Matter, then it's climate change, then it's what's next?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And because you do get tired thinking about, I've only got so much energy to spend feeling compassionate, sympathetic, or caring for those people in those situations in that part of the world, in that context. I mean, I get tired. Obviously, because literally, the physics of it is, or the biology of it is, that we are burning calories, like a lot of calories, and you're maybe trying to grow new neural pathways to think about the stuff and think about it and adapt to it, and that's painful too. Nobody wants to change their mind, literally. The body doesn't want to either.
So you do a lot of work with corporations who must be constantly thinking about this, like not wanting, I assume, I don't do this work, so I'll test this out with you, is it must be difficult for folks to find the thing if they don't actually have it. So if it's not internal, if they don't have a passion for something, then you could probably play whack-a-mole on the hot button issue. Well, today and is that okay? Is that just sort of are people just working out their corporate social responsibility? What's happening in those kind of?
Yeah, no, you raise a really good point that I hadn't actually considered before. Companies often pivot or shift their focus from one social issue to a next, right? Or they can say, next 5 years, we're going to focus on STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, right? But even within that, we're going to have this partner for this period of time around this project, and then we're doing this project over there. And the reason they tell themselves that they need that is because novelty catches attention. Like when you talk about it, if for 5 years IBM talked about the same thing and a 2% increase, which could be significant, amazing impact for hundreds of thousands around the world, but 2% change year over year, just like, that's really boring. So they need something that's going to catch our attention. Like I said, it's either got to be a threat or a benefit that's going to catch our attention. So they keep needing to do this also to get the attention of their own employees, because unless it is internalized in some way, if it's external, it will always be that newness quality in order to get anybody to notice it in the first place.
Yeah.
I kind of knew all that, but I hadn't connected those dots so directly. So yeah, that's great.
I'm thinking about when we used to do street walks and we would go and walk around the downtown of Halifax prior to Sunday suppers. Do you remember what I wore every week? There was a t-shirt. I wore the Superman t-shirt every week.
I only remember the winter being for like jackets and stuff. I don't remember anything from the summer.
It was a mindset. No, every summer, every Friday. No. It was one of the things that I did because I thought about it in terms of justice.
What was the t-shirt?
A Superman t-shirt, like the Justice League. And this sense of,
I do remember
there
now.
We
oh my
go.
Gosh. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I do remember because we did talk about this.
So
okay. This is great.
For me, that Justice League idea has been the glue on a whole bunch of different things. It's not so much the issue, but the what's behind it. People are hurting. This doesn't seem fair. This doesn't seem right. I have a belief that people should be well and whole and be able to be respected and cared for, and that good, just relations in the world are what we should be establishing with one another, which I think then becomes how the expansion of my in-group beyond just my DNA. So who gets to become part of this group is that this firm belief that I think that right should be done. Like I think we should do right by one another. So if there's a call to action and there's a injustice, I'm kind of going to lean in. If it's just about something where I can't see that justice node, I'm less likely to get involved. I wonder if there's a corporate version of that, helping them find their Justice League moment, helping them find their t-shirt. So it doesn't actually matter what the issue is, so long as you're consistent with who you are, your identity, or you want to be in the world.
This is a great way to bring in what we were talking about before we started recording, which is Tony Robbins. Anybody who knows, everybody knows.
Everyone knows Tony.
Like Coca-Cola, Tony Robbins. Everybody knows these brands. So Tony Robbins, since the 80s, when he was doing it in the basement of hotels, like really cheesy, is this, what would you call him? He's not a self-help guy. In fact, he said some things about mental health that I thought, Tony, wrong. But what was he?
I don't know how you
motivational
speaker, I guess. Yeah.
Motivational speaker. Okay. But the thing about him, and this is what Jake and I were talking about, is where I love to say there is a piece of research done in 1979 by Green and Lepper called How to Turn Play into Work. And it looked at yada, yada, yada. I love that stuff because I feel like I need a credential what I'm about to say. Tony has no problem. Tony will just say, hey, here's an experience that we've all had, right? Have you had it? He'll set it up. And I'm like, yeah, I've had that experience. Then he'll say the thing and I'll think, that makes a lot of sense. Or he'll reference his own life, but he's very experience referential. It doesn't matter because he's right. So as he's going along, I'm like, Tony, where's this coming? Oh, okay, that's social identity theory. That's really great. So one of the things that he talks about is how we as human beings are absolutely obsessed with ourselves and with our identity. Here's who I am, right? We come into the world with nothing and we're given a box of identity items, your name, your gender, your faith, where you live, when, like space-time. Mm-hmm. You're told when space-time is, because if you just showed up on the planet, would it be 2024? Nope. It would just be now. Like even our constructs of time and space, we're given all of this. And then we're given symbolic language, the ability to talk to each other and think about what a ball is. And all this amazing evolutionary ability is filled in by the humans around us and our own experience of the world, spatial experiences, time experience, consequence experiences. All of this stuff is happening to us and we assemble it all. And at some point we think this is what it means to be Jake McIsaac. This is Jake McIsaac. Mm-hmm. And then somebody comes along and says, Jake McIsaac, you are a procrastinator. Get your stuff in on time. And Jake,
that would be absolutely true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man,
my friend.
Oh man, I'm a procrastinator. Oh shit. Yeah. So, and then, sorry about swearing. And then, so something comes along, and you're like, oh, I don't want to do it. You know why? Because I'm a procrastinator. And you tell yourself this story over and over, and you start to believe the narratives that are built on the things that you were given. And this becomes your identity, and you will fight to the death for your identity, even though none of us intentionally built any of it. It's just sort of a cobbled together bunch of stuff. But at some point as an adult, we have the opportunity to take the reins here. And so this is where I'm getting with all of this. We are obsessed with our identity, and we have an idea that we tell ourselves, and we reinforce it with the stories that we tell ourselves. So if it is too painful to see something in one part of the world, and I need to look away, one, because they're not my in-group, they're my out-group. I don't really share enough affinity. So they're not Canadian. It's not happening to another Canadian or another guy or somebody like me. There's not enough affinity where I think that's them, not me. And I turn away and I tell myself what? I'm not them.
Right.
I'm not them. 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 And we do that to sort of assuage, if I'm using that word correctly, or soothe or calm our feelings, because we have a sense of what it means to be in solidarity as a human being. And this takes us to a place where we can, without any intention, without any conscious thought whatsoever, we just put them in a category that's not me. And that category also weirdly is labeled not human. Because if you're not me, if you're not in my in-group, I have the ability to dehumanize it. I rationally know they're human beings. I haven't lost my mind. But it also allows me to be okay with a lot of things that I would never be okay with if they happen to me or my kids, or like you were saying about justice. So identity is the one thing, and this is what Tony is going on about. Identity is the one thing that it is based on the stories we tell ourselves. We have agency to tell ourselves different stories. If we tell ourselves stories where we might include the other, then we may find ourselves looking at a different range of options. We might find ourselves being less willing to dehumanize people just to make it through the day.
Yeah, it's funny, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about those TikTok videos that sometimes come up showing people getting hurt. And they try to do it in a funny way where you're watching someone skateboard and they don't quite land it, and you recoil. And
I watch that guy too. It is usually an engineering or construction scene, and there's concrete everywhere, and he goes,
but you can almost feel it in your body, right? You can feel it
Yes.
like it's
Yes.
your foot or your ankle being broken.
Yes.
Or so
Absolutely.
there is this tide that when we imagine it's us in that
Yes.
moment, or we can
Yes.
imagine what that is for another person, it's painful. So it's not that we can't
Mhm.
figure out what it is. It's that we don't
Mhm.
allow our minds to go there. But when we think it's
Mhm.
funny and we think it's like, oh, it's just momentary like pain,
Mhm.
I could probably do that. I can watch a few of those videos, even though I know it's going to make me feel queasy. It's
Mhm.
someone's going to get it, get injured here, and
Mhm.
it's going to sort of manifest itself for a moment, just a fraction in
Mhm.
my own body,
Mhm.
even though there's no real reason for that to happen other than my brain.
Mhm.
Just
Well, even the ability to find the unexpected result humorous. I mean, comedy is based on that. But if you kept
yeah.
watching this person get hurt, at some point you're like, what is going on? Stop. Like, just somebody needs to stop this from happening. It goes from, oh, this isn't a joke, to something I think we switch over pretty fast.
I hope we would hope in that
There you go.
until we get
Unless
calloused.
I'm told, yes, okay. If the premise, if it's been framed that the clown will, like Laurel and Hardy, I don't know how many people in our audience know this
Wow.
historical ancient reference, Laurel and Hardy, two slapstick, physical comedians with it,
Show notes, buddy. Show
swinging,
notes.
swinging the ladder around, hitting the other person, keeps happening over. But we're told what? Frame that in the sense of this is on purpose and it's for comedic relief, because it is kind of humorous to go, oh, I didn't expect that. That's the verbal comedy or visual
Mhm.
comedy. And I can't explain comedy, but there's a quality to that if it's framed, it's okay. But in real life, I don't think most people would find that kind of thing if they thought it was intentional humorous. It has to do with the framing, I would assume.
Yeah, I think the framing is important because you can anticipate a particular outcome, and then before it happens, you decide that it's going to be
That's right.
funny, right? It's the banana
That's
peel
right.
on the floor at the bottom of the
That's
stairs.
right.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be great. Unless you
Mhm.
actually
Mhm.
saw a banana peel at the bottom of the stairs in your real life, you'd go, I should clean that up because someone could get really hurt.
Yeah.
I should do
See, there's
something about
two.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. And we do the same thing in degrees, this framing. And you already touched on it. If we can imagine the mind of the other, what would it be like to live in Palestine,
Hmm.
where, just to catch everybody up, between 48 and 67, 70% of the people who live there are refugees from wars. So their whole life was wiped out and they were relocated there. Youth unemployment is at 77%. There's nothing to do. Electricity is only available for maybe 6 hours a day. Before any of this, they were rationed water, they were rationed electricity. Most people, 25%, had a future. Most people were just like nothing. And then most people struggle with dehydration as well, due to this limited amount. I think it was just a couple liters per person per day. So
Wow.
the entire population is dehydrated and anxiety filled. So if I can free myself to imagine a name, a place, a routine, where I work, or my skill, but I have no place to work. Like, if somebody could kind of guide me through that, to imagine myself in that situation, ask me questions, and what would I do in that situation? That is what is needed to trigger the visualization or mentalization that can trigger the empathy and potentially move them into my in group if I can see enough affinity between me and them. And that's the hard work. Because without that, we have evolved to protect ourselves from this kind of pain,
Mm-hmm.
and also to be able to inflict this kind of pain on other populations. Humanity is rife with genocide.
In order to carry out that level of inhumane treatment for another person, we have to believe they're monsters. We have to dehumanize them so profoundly. Or if we can't dehumanize them, demonstrate their risk to our humanity, that their ongoing presence. If I can't dehumanize you, then I have to make sure that you present such a threat that the only ability to do anything with that tension is to take out the threat so that I can be okay, so I can protect the rest of my in-group. There can only be those two responses in many ways. And I think what you're asking is there a third runway or what? Like, are you calling for bystanders? Like, it feels like a bystander moment. Like, what do the rest of us do?
Bystander effect would be all of us saying somebody's going to do something.
Right.
So some of that is at play, right? And that is at play because of our limited sense of agency based on the identity we've given ourselves. If I'm a police officer standing there, I'm probably not going to be affected by bystander effect because I was trained with agency to step in a situation like this. But I don't think we're talking about bystander effect as the driving factor. 95% of the world has a self-serving bias whereby at a very early age, we would justify our actions over those of others, even if they're the same actions in the same context, because we would say, I did it because I want to get home to. They did it because they don't want to sit at a red light, right? Like they cut me off because they're just want to get to McDonald's and get food. I actually am going to court because I'm an officer of the court, whatever. I mean, this is a natural attribution. And if you play it out to the further extent combined with dehumanizing, it allows us very easily to say, if I was in Gaza under these conditions, dehydrated, 4 hours to work, only 25 of us out of 100 can even work. There's no hope. There's nothing. And I'm stuck here. I can't leave. I probably would have tried to start a business, I guess. I would have reached out on the internet. I would have taken advantage of international aid. We imagine ourselves to be this holistic person who's really going to struggle, but not making those desperate choices. And that's because without somebody guiding us to really vividly imagine the pain in a way that we can understand, we'll never cross the divide, the self-serving bias that just protects us from having to do this kind of hard work.
Can I take the other side? And it's just, I wonder if some of that is at play on October 7th for folks who went to a concert. They left their homes, they left their families, they were going to have fun, they're dancing, and all of a sudden besieged. That what you talked about is happening behind and building and growing this undercurrent or this unrest. I hear that. And I wonder if part of that shock, the shock and awe of the October 7th attack on the Israeli folks who were partying, who didn't have that experience, who were just having fun.
And then all of us probably were very pro-Palestinian. I mean, there's many Israelis who are just, let's solve this problem, not treat them this way. Yeah, absolutely.
So I wonder if it caught folks and it catches the world off guard. So when we're forced in those shock and awe moments like October 7th or September 11th, when it's in the heart of New York City, when it calls us to look really, really intensely at the architecture of injustice behind something. So it calls us to look through this absolutely horrific event that is the culmination of lots of injustice. It's like it's hard to process all of that at once, and many people are doing that. Maybe that is the introduction to it for them. They are learning about injustice in terms of what happened in New York City or what happened at a music concert, and not having to look at what else matters.
Wait, what do you think the result was of this event though in October? Was it the door opens and more people are looking at it, or
no? I think what happens, it's a pattern that we want to reset quickly because there's just so many eyes looking at it without not enough avenues to process it. So it keeps us locked into this state of urgency without a lot of sense making behind it.
Oh,
Or sense making, and then we nationally turn it off. We have to then get on to the next thing. It's an election.
Assessed it. Yes, it's not a threat. It's not a benefit to to the regular American. It's neither. So I want to watch something else, like
an election.
Two old men, two really, really old people trying to run an empire, which is
there's some absolute bizarre patterns that we get locked into when we are able to look away, and then it's on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering what the staying power. So going back to my friend who was at the gym, who can't wait for people to reach that I give up moment. I'm going to try something new, new me, new year. Then I'm banking that you fail. And when you fail, I hope that you'll quit so we can get back to normal.
Okay. So Jake, the entire place is basically refugees from 2 decades of war. And since those 2 decades, there's been 4 decades of brutal, harsh mistreatment and dehumanization by a political party of the winning side. I know one thing, and it's what Jake said on a podcast that I listened to, and that is you need a flashpoint. The slow push on things isn't enough to capture human behavior because, like Chris Jarvis said, we notice what's new in their environment. Is it a threat or a benefit? So we need to make a big flashpoint as best we can with whatever we can to get the world to notice us, because we've been screaming at the top of our lungs for attention because we're being killed slowly and nobody cares. So this is what we're going to do. Did you just recast that day in the category of reasonable force? Not denying the horror of it or anything around it, but is it now reasonable because it's taking into account the geopolitical nature of the situation and human tendencies?
I have the privilege to never have had to think about it that way personally, right? So there's this quote about, who am I to judge how another person agitates for their own freedom? And I think that comes out of sort of out of Jamaica. So I still am there. I don't know that I have any right or license to be able to say, is that right or is that wrong? I just know that standing back, seeing it a bit removed, it's maybe not a bystander, but there is an audience that's trying to figure out. And I think we've been told that we have to pick a side instead of figure out what is actually happening. Like what's at risk here? It is a justice problem, largely.
But isn't that what Mr. Coates was saying on that episode?
Last episode?
Yeah, it was just, look, the Black community has so much in common with the Jewish plight and the Palestinian plight. But now which side are we standing on? Aren't they enough in your in-group that you have by nature of your own group's experience? For example, the one group in the world that has the right to take Israel to court would be South Africa, because they went through it, looked it hard in the face, went through all the hell of it, and now they're like out the other end. Perfect? No. But they have a leg to stand on, having had to do that internal national work. Don't you also have a leg to stand on?
I don't think so. So South Africa is an interesting comparator. So I would agree with you. Not perfect, and I do wonder about the positioning. I do wonder about sort of there is a moralizing by getting there. Like I'm not sure that all of the intention, from what I've seen, is pure to bring it. Sometimes misery loves company. If the language of apartheid starts to conjure up South Africa, wouldn't it be great for South Africa to make sure you have something else to think about? So,
I get the marketing.
Yeah,
I do get it.
So I'm not sure that it's all good, but we do recognize some patterns of injustice from a human level. So when you talked about our groupings, I was imagining them like those nesting dolls or nesting tables, the Russian dolls, where I'm in Nova Scotia, I'm in Canada, I'm in North America, and all of these constructs that we live in or how we organize gives us more distance. So the more I can drill down and get micro, I don't actually have to think about a human experience. That actually takes away a lot of that. Like when I don't have to say, I wonder what it must be like for humans in this moment. Because then I can start to imagine doing exactly what you're suggesting. It gets our brains involved. It starts to focus in on the empathy. What do I do with how I'm feeling? I have to sense make really quickly. This doesn't feel very good. So I either have to do something or turn away. I want to figure out how to get less geopolitical and more human. And because you've organized it in groups, and I don't know if that's right. I just know that that's where I'm struggling to say, what if I don't want to take a side? Not because I'm afraid, like we talked about in the last episode about, you can't look at injustice and stay silent. Ta-Nehisi Coates says something to that effect. What if it's not that, but what if it's about trying to find where are the similarities so that those markers of common experience and shared experience that people are hurting. And when I hurt, I know what I tend to need. And I wonder if they need it. So you can, instead of trying to figure out the what, it's what do people need and how can I help?
Is the reason you're coming to this because there was a flashpoint where a large amount of hurt was done in a short period of time, a bit like 9/11, versus a tremendous amount of hurt slowly doled out over a long period of time, which is 4 decades leading up to it or more, right? So because of the flashpoint, you're able to say, look, there's hurt on both sides. But if it was the slow buildup, I'd be surprised if you would apply the same approach to black-white conversations.
Well, I'm a little bit closer to that, but I think,
this is Coates' point too, right? He's like, based on your ideology, you're close to the Palestinians too.
Yeah, but I think the world as a flashpoint, to the really nice guy I talked to this last week was like, hey, remember that Black Lives Matter moment in time, not as a movement, not as a cry, not as a struggle, not as a realization that people would have to wrestle to and then sort of set right the scales of injustice. It was like, there was the flashpoint, the murder of George Floyd.
It's like a season.
It's a season. And I'm trying to resist this being a season. There's lots of times where I don't turn my mind to Russia, Ukraine until I go back and go, oh, there's injustice there too. Like there's lots of injustice. And then I'm wondering about, well, if I look and find it everywhere, what am I doing to myself?
Well, that's what
what am I doing to myself?
Yeah.
Now I can't help anybody.
Okay. So this is what I'm saying. The one thing that I never get tired of thinking about is my identity. Is there a way to bring through experiential learning a group into my identity enough, and like the unhoused? I don't get tired of that topic.
Right.
I'm not unhoused and none of my relatives are. That has been a big part of my life. And now I've adopted my identity. So anybody wants to bring it up, I'll read more information. I don't get the emotional exhaustion, this sense of, because it's my identity, but I also have done enough work that I feel like I have agency. So if I want to do something in some way, I not only know what to do and how to do it, but I know what kind of meaning I could attribute to it. Am I solving the problem? No, I would never bring that meaning to it. But I know in this context, this behavior has this meaning, and that is a contribution. That is part of who I am, and that's my identity. With the Palestinian-Israeli thing, no agency, very little knowledge to know what to do in which particular context. It's incredibly complicated, with all people saying all things about all sides, whether they're part of it or not. And it's so far away. And I haven't done any in-group work with either group, so I don't feel like that's my people. So I do get tired. I'm like, too much, too far, not me, and no immediate relevance. So I have to, even though there's solidarity and humanity in the sense of even Justice League stuff, my version of that, I have to look away or I'm going to just lay in bed.
I wonder if I was listening to you talk about that, and my first thought was scalable lessons. So, or scalable learning, right? So you're right. I have those pockets where I don't get tired. some alignment in the same community. We spent a lot of time at the Sunday suppers together, and there are just places where I want to dig in. I want to learn as much. And maybe that's okay if not every place is that playground of learning or that lab for you. But you better have one, and you better be able to take it somewhere else. And so to pulling those out, I can see how lessons learned at the Sunday suppers help frame up for me my notions of justice, whether I'm working with folks in the criminal legal system, or if we're talking like these big ideas, neighbor, because those were really important human lessons, human interactions that taught us how to connect with other people in ways that made sense. And so then it's just kind of scaling it. I wonder if that's what some of the next piece of work is, to figure out where to go next.
Right. So this takes us back to where to go next in the immediacy of my own sense of agency in my world that I have around my own identity. There are these companies that will take hundreds of thousands of people out in the community. And if I could show them how to do it in a way that triggers this one thought to say, what if that was me? What would it be like for me to be in that situation? And then give them enough experiences to grow the new neural pathways, and then translocate that learning to, what about this community and this issue? And I think that's a small, scalable learning how to do it, and then looking for opportunities to apply it. I would not begin necessarily with, the issues happening in the Middle East right now.
Right.
I would begin with the things that are naturally the closest thing to my identity, and that is in my neighborhood, or in my group, or at my work, where there's a strong sense of affinity. Tag along, and then think, I'm going to bring some goddamn intention to my life, so that when I'm confronted with things like this, I don't automatically go to the overwhelm. I have a sense of agency, a sense of my own identity, and I can make some decisions about how to respond.
I think that's right. I think there's probably something that we both believe in, that doing nothing is a problem. So whenever people stand back and say, it's not my responsibility, those folks are anathema to it. Like, I can't handle people who just say, not my problem, I'm not going to do anything.
Oh my God. Your life has no relevance.
Right.
Yeah, you are irrelevant.
You're taking up space on the planet.
Yeah, that's the unforgivable sin in my mind.
I agree. So I think we both agree there, and we have those interactions and see folks like that. And it's not I haven't thought about that before. It's like there's some intention to it. It is the won't, not can't or haven't thought about it. It's the I won't do that. There's just not a lot of time for those folks. No. But there is something about what we believe will make a difference, I think, is shared, is that a more caring, connected community where we are paying attention to the other more intentionally and wrestling with that. So not just paying attention to the in-group, but paying attention to at least our relationship to groups that we don't have those markers of similarity, familiarity, and affinity.
Right. Observable behavioral or physical markers.
We're right up against them, and we're saying, don't look away, lean in, care, and that if you care, it will likely create these new pathways for you to understand the world.
Well, caring comes as a result of imagining me as the person.
So you can't do it without some proximity. So
you need, mentalizing is good, but it has to combine with some sort of task significance or activity. I can't think my way into new neural pathways. That's impossible.
Right, which is why you do immersive learning. You don't just don't bring them to a classroom and say, we're going to talk about unhoused folks, or you say, we're going to go to the soup kitchen and you're going to meet Jake. And why would I meet him? Because Jake has a name, like you have a name. Oh, I didn't think of people as had a name. I thought of the person who has a sign, and the sign says, I need food. Well, have you ever asked their name? So you create those ways where they can see each other on the most, where they can exchange something. You can exchange a greeting. If you're comfortable, you can share your name. They will share their name likely. You can, and as you have those similar contacts, are like, oh, we are alike.
Yes,
I might smile, and they might smile back at me. And I thought, oh my God, I've never had someone smile at me who was homeless. Because you didn't try that first. I thought they were going to kill me.
Right.
So I wonder if that's maybe what we believe about the world is just more access to those moments and then scale them up.
And if employee volunteering is done right, and there's a brief, and we talked about this significance of the task, and we imagine what it would be like to be the other person. We have this experience, and then we resolve our disorienting dilemma through a what did you experience and what did you expect kind of question. And then we just throw in, and this is our offering to you to begin to have some agency to think about what is happening in the world to people. What are people doing to people? What are they? And you're going to begin to learn scalable skills that you're going to be able to translocate to other situations. Yeah. And you'll be surprised when it happens. But if you have the discipline to come back here and practice the behavior so that your brain can learn these methodologies and approaches, they then become tools that you can use versus I just can't deal with it. And you shut down and life becomes smaller and smaller and safer until you only care about, the game shows on in the afternoon while you drink your soup through a straw.
One last reference to the gym, maybe taking the metaphor way too far. But that last piece that I thought about is then the value of having these guides, right? So if I don't go to the gym and I don't get hooked up with a personal trainer, and I don't get someone to say, do this, I probably will quit and not do all of that work. So I think that might be the advice that I would give folks who are listening along to say, okay, I want to do that. I want to scale. Know that there are people who are already doing that. And it might be easier to join a journey with a guide to say, how do I do it? How did you do it? People who are not, they don't have to be experts, but just helpers in making sense of it.
Absolutely critical. And if we're living our life without a sense of sharing what's kind of working or our questions with somebody else, then we're probably not contributing at our highest level, or it's something to look at. I mean, the season might preclude it. I don't know, but hey, one thing before we close, I just want to go back. I said the unforgivable sin is writing people off as irrelevant. And I just want to acknowledge that I'm not writing them off as irrelevant. I am just saying it becomes literally impossible to share insights or have an interesting discussion with people who've already decided that their identity is not to be curious or not to be empathetic, or like that their identity is rage or anger or violence, and they reaffirm that on opportunities that they need to for a whole bunch of, I do want to say, very understandable, reasonable, evolutionary reasons that have all gotten weirdly tied up in their life kind of thing. They're not irrelevant. I'm just saying that that's not a great investment of our time at this point.
You're far more charitable than I am. If you say you don't care, I believe you, and you are a threat to the work that I'm trying to do in terms of just relations in the world.
I agree with that.
So,
too.
I'm done. I am done. If you tell me you don't care and all of your actions demonstrate you don't care, I will believe you. And then I'm done.
Okay. We'll do good cop, bad cop if you want.
I'm just always bad. I feel like I'm always the bad guy. Anyway, it's a good chat.
All right. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate this. I really did. I don't know if the listener is going to believe this, but I really did need to figure some of this stuff out. And I appreciate your help doing that. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, talk soon.
Okay, see you, man.